Hello and welcome. Third time is the charm, ladies. So thank you for being patient. Um, my name is Coach Steph. I am a weight loss and mindset coach. Today I'm going to be talking with licensed therapist Tracy, and she's going to give us some tips on stress management. So, if you joined us earlier, we had a little technical difficulties, but we are back, and I think it's going to work this time. So, I appreciate you guys being patient and hopping back on for this really, really important topic. We all know that 2020 was super stressful for a lot of us. And I think just as Black women in general, we need to know and have more skills in terms of how to identify stress. Because I know a lot of people who don't even know they're under stress because it's just so normal, and how to manage stress, how to prevent stress and being overwhelmed. So, Tracy is a licensed marriage and family therapist who's going to be talking to us today about stress management. So I'm going to try this again, y'all. I'm going to try it again. Okay. It should work this time. Again, thank you so much for being patient. Yay, here's Tracy. Okay. I've learned a lot, I have to say. I have learned a lot in a very short period of time. Hi, Tracy.
Hi.
It worked this time. Okay,
Yeah.
so I was laughing at us, or at me really, because I was like, okay, I we just did a run through, and so I've learned multiple things in this fiasco. But I'm so glad that you are on and you're able to join us. So I did briefly introduce you, but I kind of want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself and tell the people about who you are and what you do.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. I'm Tracy Panak. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I have a virtual psychotherapy practice that's based out of Connecticut because that's where I'm licensed as a therapist. And so in my practice, I work with women around healing from heartbreak and dealing with tough life transitions of all kinds. And I help people to work on managing stress. So in the coaching realm, I have workshops that I do for companies around stress management and an online course for individuals around stress management.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. So, kind of just wanted to start with like some basic questions regarding like stress and what is stress. And as you ladies are listening, I see like 20, 30 people are on. Please comment your questions. Like, what do you want to know? What are you dealing with? Um, what questions do you have? So, number one, I'm going to ask you this question, and then I'm going to go turn my monitor off because I hear my kids. So if you see me disappear, don't worry. But I'll let you answer this question. What is stress, and does it serve a purpose?
Okay. Yes. So, stress is ultimately the body and mind's response to pressures externally, internally. And it absolutely serves a purpose. Actually, stress is positive stress and it helps to motivate us. So, if you want to do well on a test and you're a bit nervous about that, it motivates you to study. But the issue is not about being stress free because if you're alive, you're not going to be stress free. That doesn't exist. And so I think that's one of the places where we get off to a tricky start with stress management because we think we want to be stress free, but that's actually not a thing. So it's more about stress management. So what you don't want is for you stress to become distress. You don't want the good stress to become overwhelming or excessive or ongoing and chronic, so that it then becomes a problem. But there is good stress. It's a thing. It's what we need to be motivated and do things. You just don't want it to get out of hand.
I like that. So making the distinction between the good stress and, I guess, would you say bad stress or
Yeah,
stress that
the harmful
causes
stress.
you,
Yeah.
yeah. That's an important distinction. And when you said that stress free is not a thing. And so that's really a mindset shift in and of itself of like this life, this human experience is not about being stress free. So I really like that. I'm actually just writing notes as we go along. I really like that. Um, can you like just give us some tools for managing stress?
Hmm.
I know that is a big one for a lot of people.
Yes, yes. So to this idea of like good stress, bad stress, I definitely think that the key way to think about it is more so amounts of stress. Although I do have this idea of categorizing stress into two categories, which I'll get into. But it's about the amount of the stress, because you can have the same stress around, okay, I have a test coming up and I'm a little nervous and anxious, so you know what, I'm going to go ahead and study so that I can do well. But that same test, if you're somebody who's overwhelmed by that stress, it could paralyze you, and then you do the opposite, you don't study because you're so, worried and concerned, and so you're kind of paralyzed. So the idea is you take that stress and you manage it so that you can help bring it down enough that you can do the thing you need to do well, in this case, study. So when I talk about categorizing stress, one of the part of the process that I talk with people about is categorizing your stress into controllable or uncontrollable. This makes you think of like the serenity prayer, where it's like, let me, be able to differentiate between what I can and can't control, pretty much, which I know I just very much summarized that, but you get where I'm going. Um, because uncontrollable stress, we must learn to cope with it. So that's one process. Where controllable stress, we can problem solve to resolve it or reduce it. So, for instance, uncontrollable stress. So, let's say you have a couple of stressors going on in your life. Maybe someone you care about is ill. Maybe you have a bunch of work to get done by a certain deadline. Maybe you are looking at bills that have to get paid. So the first thing you would do is those three stressors, and stressors are just the things that are stressing you out. So those three stressors are things that you would categorize into controllable or uncontrollable. Someone being ill, that's generally uncontrollable. You cannot directly impact their ability to be well. Whereas your bills getting paid and getting your work done is something that you can technically control or influence in some way. So the ill loved one is a stressor that you're going to learn to cope with. So coping comes into play, or coping is where you put in the tools that help you to have some sense of peace, pretty much. So I really see that as pretty much a lot of the things that are considered to be self-care, but that makes me have to kind of give a quick little spiel on self-care, because it's a term that's used a lot these days, and I define it as anything that brings you a sense of peace, joy, or excitement. So that is not the same for everyone. Self-care is not a one size fits all scenario. We have to be able to identify what that is for ourselves. But anything that brings me a sense of peace, joy, or excitement are the type of things that I'm going to need to lean on in order to help cope with the stress of my ill loved one. So if that's meditation, if that's reading a book, if that's journaling, if that's taking a walk, if that's exercising, you name it, we can go down the list. But it needs to suit me. So I would first want to be doing an evaluation on what is self-care for me and making a list of those things. What brings me peace, joy, excitement. But in summary, I'm leaning towards those things to help me deal with my ill loved one. Maybe that's praying for me. Maybe that's attending church, talking to a good friend, going to therapy, any of these things. But then on the end of like getting the bills paid, or what was the other example I used? I forgot. Oh, work, being busy at work. I'm now going to look at like a problem solving method of what are the things that I can do to help resolve those stressors or reduce them. So let's say, okay, getting bills paid and money is tight. I'm first wanting to sit down and identify my resources. So identify the people, places, things, tools in my life that can help me, or that can even potentially help me address the stressor. I'm also looking at the things that are not in my life that maybe if I were able to bring into my life could help me address the stressor. So when it comes to like paying bills and money being tight, are there people who I could potentially ask to borrow money from? Is it, getting a personal loan? Is it finding a new job? Like we're out here brainstorming all the things. So some of these solutions might be short term, like being able to ask a best friend to borrow some cash. Others might be more long term, like ultimately I know I need to increase my income, so I'm going to be looking down the job search journey, right? But what I'm getting at here is that being deliberate about sitting down and doing this process helps you to start to develop a proactive relationship with stress management rather than a reactive relationship that's always about scrambling when something happens. And don't get me wrong, there are emergencies and things in life that happen that we cannot prepare for. And so you do have to scramble there. And that's what we would call acute stress. So that's like a car accident happening or an emergency happening. It's immediately stressful. It happens but it's not ongoing and chronic. It's in that moment we have to respond. That's life. But you don't want every event in your life to be like that. You don't want to
Right.
constantly be having to jump to deal with stressors and be reactive. It's not healthy mentally and physically or emotionally for us. So, to that point, this process is more about like, I want to be good at managing stress. That does not mean that I will be stress free. That does not mean that I will never get stressed out or feel overwhelmed at times. And again, when emergencies and things happen, all I can do is react. But it is saying that generally speaking, I know there's going to be bills to always be paid. I know there's going to be children to be parented. I know there's going to be a house to be cleaned, all of these sort of things. So how do I prepare myself for how I generally move through these things? I know that people I love are going to pass away or people are going to get sick. How do I generally have a plan for how I cope through these things? So
Mm-hmm.
kind of back to like the bill paying thing, you're identifying your resources or any potential resources, and then you're making a plan on how you're actually going to go and um, seek these resources out. Meaning, like, if you think that your friend is somebody who might be able to lend you some money, you're going to make a plan like, okay, I'll call her tomorrow and ask her for the money. And if I need to get this work project done, you know, I'm thinking about the people who are on my team as coworkers. Is my manager somebody who I can talk to? Is, you know, do I really need to be considering a job change because this job is completely stressful and toxic? But it's this type of thoughtful effort and planning that can help us kind of better move through the stressors that we actually have some influence over.
Mm-hmm. So I love that. So you said a lot of things. So I'm going to kind of dissect a few things. So um, you mentioned eustress and like distress, right? Differentiating those two things. Then you also mentioned when you first started talking, you said sometimes stress can push you to doing what you need to be doing or should be doing, right? And then
Right,
sometimes it can paralyze you to where like literally I know I need to be studying for this test or I know I need to be meal prepping because I mean that some of that is like stressful for people too, like
right,
in the fitness. And so they procrastinate to decrease the stress in that moment
right,
and they end up not doing any of what they need to do and then it kind of like piles up later on the guilt about not doing it
right.
and then also the task just being undone. So I thought that was a really good point too because sometimes stress can push you to do what you want to do but then sometimes it can also paralyze you.
Yeah.
um, so can you talk a little bit more about, um, I like what you mentioned about the coping mechanisms. So I love the idea. And so this is something that we have to do, right? So every time I have a live, I always like to have like literal action steps because it's great to hear things, it's great to know things, but the key is really implementation. And so, what Tracy was just mentioning about literally writing down what self-care looks like to you. So for me, I write everything in this journal. Like this has all of my brain dumps, all of my ideas, like literally write down what does stress or self-care look like to you? What increases your energy? How do you relax? So it's important to know that and like literally think about that. Like
Yep.
maybe it's a song. Maybe it's as simple as like putting on a song and um, you know, listening to some music. Um, I know for clients that I coach, we literally plan in something that brings you joy. Like find the joy,
Yep.
plan it in. I know on Saturday at 10 a.m. while I'm doing my cleaning, I'm going to also have a dance party with myself. I'm gonna blast some music and I'm going to do that. And I'm going to set an intention. I'm going to put it on the calendar
Yes. Yes.
instead of saying someday I will, because someday is not on the calendar. It is not a day of the week, right? So we have to be really, really intentional about planning that in. And I think that's a good point. Like not only when you're feeling stressed, but even when you're not particularly stressed, having that as just a general practice of
Yes.
self-care.
100%.
So,
I I'll preach all day long. You're right on the money. Self-care is not something that we do just because we're stressed. Self-care is something we do because it's caring for ourselves. So I am a proponent of self-care at all costs, self-care every day. Yes, every day. Because again, what self-care is is on a spectrum. So if you enjoy taking naps, that's self-care for you, all the way up to taking an extravagant trip and everything in between. So you can't take an extravagant trip every day, but you might be able to take a nap every day or a nap every other day. And on some days, do a 10-minute meditation. Other days, take a walk outside in the sun. But like to your point, we need to be able to say, this is self care for me. And a lot, especially working with women, especially working with mothers, I find a lot of times that if you ask a woman, like, oh, what is self care for you? She'll sit there sometimes like, because she's so
oh
used to
yeah.
taking care of everybody else and hasn't
Mhm.
looked at how to take care of herself. And so when we cannot readily identify, this is self-care for me, this list of things, then that's a core issue that we definitely want to look at and address, because then that means we don't know what to turn to help bring peace, joy, or excitement to ourselves. And that is going to prevent us from being able to manage stress or be well.
Right. Yeah, I have experienced the same when I'm talking, especially to mothers who literally have never even asked themselves that question. And I feel like a lot of times as women of color, like we literally don't even ask ourselves like how we feel about nothing. We're just
Yeah.
doing in the moment. And so taking that time every day is what I call a power hour. It doesn't have to be an hour, but intentional time alone every day. So like to refocus on your goals or to make a plan for the week or to do meditation, affirmations, all of those things. And it's you're making little deposits into yourself, right? So that when the time comes, you can make some withdrawals because it's really hard to, be the strong women that we are when at times we haven't been pouring into ourselves and we're
Yep.
trying to withdraw and there's nothing has been put in there.
Yep.
So just kind of slowing down and like in this fast-paced world, that's difficult, but really being intentional about that is super important. So can you talk a little bit about how to deal with work stress? Because we all
Yeah.
have to go to work.
Yes, yes. And this is a particularly interesting conversation right now because there are a lot of people who are working from home. So it becomes this whole topic on how we pretty much set boundaries around work for people who are working in the same place that they live, but also whether in person or, also in person, is this idea of a big part of it to me is about boundaries, because boundaries, it need to exist in every type of relationship, work relationship, you and your kids, you and your partner, friends, all of that. It Boundaries help us understand what to expect from others and helps others to understand what to expect from us. So when we're talking about work, it helps us to be able to know when to say yes or no to a task, when to delegate tasks out to other people. And obviously all of this depends on your role, this depends on your job duties and all of that, but as a general rule, everything is not on the plate, in terms of like all things are not your job duty. There's not a job where all the things are your job duty, right? So to that, we sometimes have to be able to say to someone, advocate for ourselves and respectfully say, like, this is not, a good time. I can talk with you, in an hour. I can talk with you, whatever, on Wednesday, that sort of thing. But like, protecting your time, which ultimately helps you protect your peace and therefore not be or manage stress. Another thing is this idea of saying yes and no and boundary setting. I like to kind of offer people a no spectrum, because sometimes it can not feel quite right to just say no to something, but there's no, there's yes but not right now, there's yes but not in that way that you're asking, and then there's just yes. And the reality is that there's a couple of those two lines in between no and yes can be appropriate, where you are willing and able to assist with something or do something, but it doesn't always have to be in the package that someone presents it to you in, and definitely not always in the timing that they present it to you in. So being able to really hone that skill of being able to set those boundaries for yourself can go a long way in how you manage work stress and, quite frankly, other stress just in your life at home and stuff like that.
Yeah, I love that. One thing that I kind of tell people is like, what can you delete or delegate from your life or from your work? because a lot of times we have a tendency to say yes or to feel like, because I know I go through this, like I feel like I can do it. Like when someone asks me to do something, or if whatever is going on, like I feel like I can get it all done. But at the
Right.
same time, it's like logistically, it's like you're setting yourself up for the okie doke, because at the end of the day, even if you could physically do it all, are you energetically able to do it all? Because
Yep.
then you're going to be drained, upset, irritated, and you're not going to, show up as your best self in the
Right.
first place. So boundaries is huge. And I think what another thing that plays into that is like the planning part, because like, okay, what are you going to say no to? And I like what you said about the spectrum. It's like, okay, I'm going to plan out my week, and if I have something that is really important to me, I'm protecting that time. And so I have my important things on my schedule.
Right.
And something that is less important, or you know maybe isn't a priority at the moment, comes along, just because someone's asking me to do something impromptu. And that's one thing that I absolutely hate. Like, I don't like surprise. I'm a type of person, I don't like surprises.
Yep.
So like, don't come over to my house without knocking or without calling.
Right.
Like, I'm like, who is this? Like, I
Not
think
gonna
it's
be
just,
home.
I can't. I cannot. So I don't like abrupt changes. I have to, like, have time to adjust to what you
Right.
just said, or to anything that's changing abruptly. But being able to set boundaries and say, okay, these are the things that are stressing me. Can I delete or delegate any of these? These are the things that bring me energy, excitement, and joy, like you mentioned. How can I do more of that? And really curating your own life, because I think a lot of us, and I was so like this before I started my entrepreneurial journey, I literally was just like, someone was trying to bring to me like the law of attraction, and like, you can, you basically can co-create like your life. And I was just like, will you leave me alone? Like, I don't want to be an entrepreneur. I think it was just like fear.
Right.
And I just was like content to like work a 9 to 5 that I didn't like, live for the weekend like a lot of people. And I was just like content doing that. But then once I actually got it in my mind that I can actually live a life that I really like, and I can wake
Mhm.
up in the morning and like do what I want to do and like enjoy my job.
Yep.
Man, I have been on that pursuit, because we are not stuck. Like, it might feel like you're stuck, right? But you are not stuck.
Right.
Like, we just have to find different ways to think about our situation, different ways to think about ourselves, because sometimes it requires us to totally break down the image that we have of ourselves, like
Mhm.
of being enough, being articulate. If you would have told me that I'd be doing a live in front of people, I would have told you that's crazy. Like, I was not that type of person. So like, really, who do you want to be? How do you want to spend your time? And how can we make a plan to do that? Because if you don't like your job, if your boss is really horrible, or you don't like what you do at your job, you can change jobs, and that job is going to be just fine.
Yep. You
Truly.
design your life. Design the plan for your life. You are the architect of your life. That is not to say that it's easy, but that just because it's not easy doesn't mean it's impossible. It doesn't mean it's not doable. And that's, the reality, because then that starts getting into the concept of change, and things that things that are hard for us to change do not change until the current circumstances are or uncomfortable enough for us to take on the uncertainty and fear of what's to come for the unknown, the changing part, right? So we can not like something, a job, our health and fitness level, things like that, and complain about them and not change them because the changing part is scary or hard
Yeah.
or feels more uncomfortable than the current discomfort we're feeling in that certain situation. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And relationships the same way. I
Oh,
see a
all
lot of
day.
people that, oh, I mean, that is a
Oh, that
huge
that's my
stressor.
wheelhouse right there. I'll have y'all on this live all night. Nobody wants.
I
So
mean,
yeah.
people stay in uncomfortable situations because they're scared of the change. And so anybody who's out there, if you were ever looking for a sign, like, you can change your life. You can get out of that relationship, you can start that, new job. Stop letting certain job descriptions make you feel like you're not qualified for the job. Because if we've learned anything in 2020, it don't matter if you qualify for that job or not. I'm gonna need you to put in that application,
That
okay?
you have nothing to lose by
Period.
applying. What? But you have a lot to lose by not applying. You don't have anything
Yes.
to lose by applying. So
Do so. So tell me this, what are some ways that you can identify that you are stressed or overwhelmed? Because I know, so I have someone in my life who literally, I'm like, you're stressed. And she's like, no, I'm not stressed. I'm like, ma'am, yes, you are tense. I mean, her whole body, I feel like her whole body is literally inflamed. Like, she's been so stressed for decades that
yeah.
that is just her norm. And so can you give us some tips on how to identify when you're stressed or overwhelmed?
Yeah. I think also talking about overwhelm and burnout, they're on the same spectrum, but they're on other different ends of the spectrum. So overwhelm is characterized by being overengaged, kind of being more frantic, feeling like you have a lot on your plate that you can't catch up, being like overengaged, like I got to do. Where burnout is on the opposite end of the spectrum. That's when we're disengaged. We've kind of lost hope. We're apathetic. We're like, I don't care about this anymore. So when you think of like, so the term burnout comes up a lot with professions like therapy and doctors, and where you're putting out a lot of effort to care for others. And so the idea of burnout is that if you're at the point of burnout, you're so stressed or don't feel like you can't tackle the stress where you're just like, I give up. And obviously, that's problematic from a standpoint of whether there's a job you have to do, like in the professional realm, whether, again, there's people you have to care for in your life, keeping your life together. Once you become apathetic, that becomes an issue in of itself. So you can kind of think of overwhelm being on the anxiety side of the spectrum, and burnout being on the depression side of the spectrum. It's how it kind of feels to characterize that. But yeah, I mean, to your point, so the example of the person in your life, you can notice it in physical symptoms, just being super tense. I know for me, and that's the thing, stress can like sneak up on us. I remember pre-COVID, I would go get my massage, and I learned that I was clenching my teeth in my sleep because my masseuse was like, why is your jaw so tight? I'm like, what do you mean? And he was like, yeah, honey. I was like, oh. So I had to start paying attention to that and start doing all these, jaw exercises and stuff. But my point being, like, I'm like, I handle my stress well. I handle my stress good. I'm good. He's like, okay, fine.
Yeah.
But also physically, it is manifesting itself in your body. So if you think about this idea, we talk about being proactive about your self-care. If you're doing things like walking, exercising, stretching, yoga, stuff like that, meditation, just as a part of your kind of daily life, you're going to help counteract some of those physical things that you may not even actively realize are kind of creeping up on you, right? And then it also is about self-reflection. So self-reflection is asking yourself questions. That's ultimately what it is. Asking yourself questions about yourself, your behavior, what you notice, what has changed. That helps you start to pinpoint and become aware of, what do I do when I'm stressed out? Do I tend to disengage and isolate myself from people? That's me. But when I start feeling overwhelmed, I'm just kind of like, I'm good. Just kind of leave me alone, right? Do I become more impatient, irritable? Do I delve into kind of dysfunctional coping tools or coping things? Is it, overeating? Is it over drinking? Is it going out and, I don't know, partying obsessively, that sort of excessively? Is it things that I realize don't contribute to my wellness and well-being? These are things that you just start noticing about yourself, because then when you start leaning towards those things, you start realizing, oh, okay, maybe I need to reel it in. But again, as you practice this idea of having ongoing regular self-care and coping, you are less likely to go to the extreme and have to reel yourself in, because you're kind of constantly coping and managing.
Hmm. There was something that you mentioned. Oh, stress it in your body. So I know that the clenching of the jaw is one. And I don't know how you feel about this or like if this is like true. I'm just reading, I have this book. It's talking about like your different chakras.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I,
So,
yeah, go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say, like, I know for me when I feel stressed I'm an anxiety person. Like it's perfectionism and all this stuff. So I feel like a knot in my like diaphragm area, like a lot. It's just like this tight knot. And so like sometimes when I take a deep breath, it kind of helps me to like a little bit release that a little bit, but I feel like it's constantly there, especially over the last couple of years. And I don't know, do you, I guess, know anything about like that and like what are some other um things in our body that we can look to tell like if we're holding energy is what it
Right,
is, it's
right.
stress, anxiety in our body.
Yeah. So I'm not well versed in chakras. It's actually, I might need to like get the book that you're reading because it's something I want to become more well versed in. But this idea of anxiety and holding stress in our bodies is very real. And just from like a psychological therapeutic standpoint, this is why people can have what we call somatic symptoms when it comes to stress and anxiety. And that is feeling physical things in your body that aren't really there, kind of. It's not to say they're not, but it's your anxiety that's causing it, not because you have a medical condition. So this can
Mm.
show up in also, like, so again, like a stomach ache. And so, especially when we talk about kids, because children do not have the same words that we have to express anxiety. That's not even a word that kids have because a lot of times adults don't even know when they're experiencing anxiety. So for children, a lot of times they might have somatic symptoms. My stomach hurts. I feel wobbly, like I don't want to go to school. That can be anxiety talking because we feel in our bodies. So by all means, mind, body, it's all connected. It really is. And so we can have ourselves so anxious or stressed that we start having physical symptoms. When it comes to like anxiety, there's things like heart palpitations, sweaty palms, sweating, like you said, a knot in your stomach, feeling nauseous, actually vomiting, shallow breathing, fast breathing, your mouth gets dry. Like there can be a bunch of things. And again, it's about checking in with yourself and noticing. This comes up a lot with anxiety attacks and panic attacks. Part of dealing with them is knowing as early as possible when one is starting to come on. And that is about noticing what are my cues in my body and my mind that start to happen when my anxiety starts to increase. Because the sooner that I'm able to realize that happening, the sooner I'm able to go into the breathing or the closing my eyes or the massaging or whatever it is that I've learned is helpful to me, the sooner I'm able to get into to do that task, the better. So definitely being able to say, this is what anxiety, okay, my heart, okay, that happens when I'm starting to get kind of anxious and stressed out. And so you have to check in with yourself.
Hmm. Yeah, and the checking in with ourselves again, like literally asking, how do we feel? We don't typically ask that, but our body is talking to us.
Yes.
That not that you feel, or if you feel, my mom says she feels like her throat like
Close
tightening
up.
up,
Yeah.
which apparently is also one of the like chakra areas or whatever. And I was like, oh my God, really? That's what it said in the book. So it's just amazing how our body is telling us exactly like it's trying to send a message to us, but we have to be in tune with how our body is feeling. We have to be in tune with our intuition, um, and having that quiet time. And that's why that intentional time alone, that power hour, is really important because that's a reset and a check-in with your mind and your body, your goals, etc. So super duper important. We did have a few questions, and you guys, if you want to ask Tracy a question, go ahead and drop it in the comment section. We had a couple of questions in the group a couple of days ago. Let me see if I can find them. It says, oh, Andrea says that basically she's closing her eyes to sleep, but her mind is still awake and she's thinking about the next day.
Hmm.
So she wants some help with like coping with that.
Yep. So sleeping. So people, when they struggle in the areas of sleeping, it's either in one 2 or 3 areas. It's falling asleep, staying asleep, or feeling well rested when you do get sleep. So I like to walk people through making a very simple sleep routine. And the idea is that you make a routine, um, you make an ideal sleep routine, and you try it out for a good 2 weeks just to see what helps and doesn't help. So kind of quickly, the thought is that I tell people pick what your ideal bedtime is, let's say 10 p.m. and 8 hours after that, because we should be trying to get 8 hours of sleep. So what's that? Seven? I don't know. 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So 6 a.m. So you need to wake up at 6 a.m. So if my ideal bedtime is to go to bed at 10 p.m. because I need to wake up at 6 a.m., then what you want to ideally do is have what I call shutdown time an hour before your intended bedtime. So that would be like 9. Shutdown time is a time where you engage only in calming, relaxing, peaceful activities, things that bring your mind and body down and help you prepare for sleep. Now, the reason why I say that when you create the sleep routine, you're going by the ideals is because right there, I can already tell you that there are people who are like, at 9 p.m., there's no way I'm shutting everything down. So I'm here to say that this is something that you work towards if it's good for your health and well-being and you actually want to make these changes. But maybe you have to be more realistic initially and like, okay, your bedtime's going to be 11 or maybe it's going to be midnight because you're actually someone who struggles with falling asleep and usually you can't fall asleep till 2 a.m. So falling asleep at midnight would be an improvement, right? So what I'm saying is though, you set up the ideal scenario and the key is to make sure that, errands, I don't know, like cooking dinner, having, watching TV, having any sort of intense conversations, all of that is done before shutdown time. So for this example, we're saying shutdown time is 9 because you want to be in bed by 10. So then what you're doing is you're making a plan for all the tasks that you're going to do during shutdown time. So between 9 and 10. So that's where we bring in things like if you're somebody who takes your shower at night, so then you're going to do your shower routine, maybe your skincare routine if that's something you do. That's where if you're going to be doing any meditation, you're doing meditation at that time. Maybe you're doing adult coloring books. Maybe you're a crafty, artsy person, so you're doing art, journaling, reading, if you enjoy reading, because this all goes back to the what's self-care for you thing. If you hate reading, then reading's not a task for you to do. But the idea is that, or maybe listening to music, any of that, listen to a podcast, listen to an audiobook. But it's pretty much no electronics unless you are using them to listen to like your audiobook or your podcast or something. But you're not on screen scrolling, you're not on the social media, you're not on the television, none of that. Maybe you go on YouTube to look up guided meditations so that you can listen to somebody talk you through a meditation, which as a side note, if you are new to meditation or you're trying to learn it, it's very helpful to do guided meditation so that you don't have to sit there and try to like zen out on your own. You have somebody guiding you. So that's just kind of a beginner's tip. Um, but the idea is I commit this time to calming my mind and body because that's what's going to help prepare me for sleep. That's going to put me in the best place to actually fall asleep. It's also going to put you in the best place to feel well rested and stay asleep. But then also, if you're somebody who wakes in the middle of the night and struggles to get back to sleep, then so to rewind, it's normal to wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, to adjust your position, anything like that. So I always say give yourself 20 minutes to fall back asleep. But if after 20 minutes you don't fall back asleep, you need to get up and do something. So that something is one of two things. The first thing I suggest you go to is back to some of those same activities that you would have done for shutdown time. So if you're a reader, have a really good, juicy, interesting book next to your bed that you just pick up and read. Because the reality is that if you weren't going to fall asleep anyway, you could at least be reading a good book, or you're a chapter into the book and before you know it, you're sleeping and you're back to sleep, right? If you wake up with a lot of thoughts in your mind, or so like this person like close their eyes and their mind is racing, that is a common reason for not falling asleep or for waking up, or having a really bad dream that can really startle people. You open up a journal and you write about everything that's on your mind. You write about the bad dream you had, you write about your to-do list that's going around in your head, you write about the thing that you're thinking about that you're worrying because you're going down the anxiety spiral, as I call it. It's kind of almost like talking to somebody and saying, hey, this is what's on my mind. But obviously, like if someone's sleeping next to you, they're not going to appreciate you waking them up at 3 a.m. to tell them everything that's on your mind. So you put that in the journal. And a lot of times just offloading that into a journal can be helpful. But then let's say you do that and you're still not ready to fall back asleep. That's again when you go to the reading, or you lay in bed and put in headphones, do a guided meditation, any of those sort of things. And so then the idea is you try to put this plan into place for a good 2 weeks without making any significant shifts, without making any real judgments about it. Because
Mm-hmm.
what you want to then do is go back to self-reflection. At the end of that 2 weeks, you ask yourself, what was helpful about that process? What was not? What is something I might tweak? Do I want to keep? And it's about building a new habit. So you try to become habitual about this, and it helps to prepare you better for sleep. Now, there's the caveats, of course, of actual medical conditions, sleep apnea, insomnia, things like that. So I'm not saying this is a cure-all for everything, but by all means, it's foundational to getting to wellness, to just kind of having some sort of way of properly preparing ourselves for sleep. Having good sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene are just kind of the routines we have around sleep.
Mm-hmm. So you were saying to do those self-care practices in between, like the hour before that you're supposed to be in the bed. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. Yes.
So we had a couple more questions, but I think we've pretty much answered those questions. So someone said looking for daily practices to be proactive about stress management as opposed to being reactive and becoming stressed out. So we kind of talked about having that self-care routine. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely details on how you kind of can put that into play. You had actually mentioned before about like putting things in agendas and schedules all day, every day. Any habit that you're trying to build that doesn't come naturally to you right now, you want to be deliberate about doing it initially. So I have this whole thing where I tell people to take out an agenda, what we call like a teacher's calendar, where the day is broken up into like 30-minute increments. And you literally write down everything for that week. When I say everything, I mean any doctor's appointments, your work schedule, if you work 9 to 5, time for sleeping. So put in that 8 hours for sleep. Every day you should have something on that agenda that is related to self-care. And you're going to put in the time that if you had, some sort of social outing, everything. The reason why you're doing this is because you're helping yourself see where you do and don't have blocks of free time, and asking yourself, what should I be doing with that time? And when I say should, it could be, I should be taking a 20-minute nap, or it could be, I should be working on that project, whatever. But it's a very objective way to see what time we do and don't have, because we always claim we don't have time. I'm here to challenge that a little bit, because sometimes we realize we have time, and then we realize what we don't have is the energy to do things in that time, or the motivation, but that's a whole other conversation. So, but by doing this very deliberate practice of scheduling things out and writing, so you can see, you can then institute that daily practice of, this is how I'm going to do this is how I'm going to do that.
Yeah, and it kind of helps you set those boundaries, knowing where you are. It's like a little audit. Like, this is where I'm
Yes.
at. This is the space that I have. This is the capacity that I have. Because a lot of times we are, we might not really be as booked as we think, because it's the mental energy that we're worrying about what I need to do before
Yes.
it even gets here. So it feels like I've been doing this all day, when
Right.
really the task will only take you an hour, but you've been worrying about it for 5 hours before then. So it
Yes.
feels exhausting by the time you get done.
100%.
Um, and we had one other question, but I think we also, so Michelle said how to deal with a job where you have no input but must meet metrics and adherence. We kind of talked about that a little bit earlier.
Yeah, a little bit, but yeah, because that is, so especially when we talk about stress management, a job like that is kind of a is foundationally an issue, in terms of the fact that there's no sense of agency in that type of position, that type of job, where you said, like, you don't have input, you just have metrics. So I'm going to speak to you on the like life coach long-term plan part. You would want to be maybe thinking about that, because on a long-term spectrum, if we don't feel that we again have a sense of agency, meaning a sense of control around our actions, behaviors, our lives, that becomes a very hard situation to deal with. But in the meantime, we are also having to just survive and deal with what we have. You might be asking yourself things around, okay, what are the support options around me? Meaning, is management, approachable? Are they not? If they are, how can I talk about or approach these sort of things? Is it a job where I can take on more hours. Maybe I'm deciding that I should take on less hours. Is it a job where I can have some tweaks to when I sign on and do something? Like, obviously, this is very specific to the circumstances, but it's about kind of getting a little creative and really reflective on where are the parts of this that I can have some movement and control, because there are so many parts of it where I can't. And I kind of always say, when faced with so many things that you cannot control, it is very important to target the things and look at the things that you have the slightest bit of control in.
Mm-hmm. And then we have a question by Kimberly. What do you do when you are actively having a panic attack? I'm in nursing school and finals are happening next week.
So, when you're actively having a panic attack, it is literally about being able to kind of get yourself to the other side of it. Panic attacks, from how they've been described, I can't say I've had a panic attack myself, some kind of anxiety moments, but people say that it can feel like they're dying. But do understand that panic attacks are not deadly. They're not harmful to you, but they feel horrible. And so in the moment, the best you can do is try to get yourself to the other side of calm as soon as possible. But ultimately, it's like riding a wave that has to go, that has to happen. So that is attempting to breathe. That is, kind of sitting down, obviously, like having yourself in a safe place, that sort of thing. Because the overall kind of, if you want to say, treatment or management of panic attacks and anxiety attacks is what I was talking about before, about all the work you do when you're not having the attacks, so that you learn about your mind and body and how it's responding, and when that anxiety is rising. And just to be clear, like a panic attack and an anxiety attack are the same, except kind of what triggers them. Panic attack tends to be something that just comes on and you can't connect why it happened, where an anxiety attack is more like, oh, I know that I had that attack because I'm really stressed out about finals or this test. Panic attack, you can just be like, I was having a good day, things were cool, I felt great, and suddenly I started hyperventilating, which is one of the reasons why they can be so scary and so frustrating, because you're like, what am I supposed to do if I don't know when it's coming? But it is ultimately a sign from your body and mind that you are feeling some sort of stress. And this, I mean, we can start getting into like, is this trauma related? Is this like from 20 years ago type of stuff? Like, but you would then be doing an assessment. So after the fact, if you're like, wow, I've been having these anxiety attacks, these panic attacks, like I want to get a handle on this, I need to have a real sit down with myself about what's going on in my life, what has gone on in my life in the past, if I really can't identify, present day things that are stressing me out. But yeah, is that job more stressful than I realized? Is this relationship that I'm in actually not really serving me? And I'm realizing I'm a bit stressed about that. Sometimes it takes a little digging to really acknowledge what is at the heart of some of these things. Other times we know exactly what's at the heart of them. So that's, again, where we want to get into this problem solving mode of like, maybe I need to make a shift here in my life.
Mm-hmm. So as we kind of conclude, I'm going to ask you one additional question, unless other people have questions. You can definitely put that in the chat. But how do you know when you need to seek professional help for your stress, anxiety, mental health issues?
Yeah, ultimately, it's not that there's a magic formula. It really is asking yourself, to what extent are these things distressing me? For something to be an official like mental health diagnosis, it's usually saying that that thing is significantly impacting work, recreation, or school. And so when you think about like being really so anxious that you're not able to get to work on time because you wake up and you are really nauseous. If you think about not being able to focus in school or in class, like those are things from a diagnostic standpoint that help a mental health professional give you an actual diagnosis. But ultimately, you go to therapy when you feel like you want to talk about things and figure things out. I happen to think, I might be biased, that everyone should go to therapy at some point in their life, no matter what. That's it. Because don't we go to the doctors? Yes, we do. I hope we do. And we tend to go to the doctors ideally proactively. We have an annual physical, we do all of that sort of stuff. The mind is right there with the body. And quite frankly, if your mind isn't in the best place, it kind of throws off everything else in your world. So you don't have to be on the brink to go into therapy. Actually, I recommend that you go in before you're on the brink, because it is a easier comeback to be proactive about it. So yeah, I mean, whenever you feel that feel distressed, or if you feel like you just want to work through some things.
Yeah, definitely. I thank you so much for joining us. And I
Absolutely.
can definitely relate with a lot of things that you said. Like, I would say too, like everyone needs some kind of therapy in some like way in your life because sometimes you don't even realize that there was like dysfunction. There's like childhood things. I recently I have a business coach and she's like more of a mindset coach than anything. And she's been blowing my mind lately with like some of like religious trauma that I didn't even know. It's like, oh my God,
Yeah.
it was just so normal to me that I'm like, that is the reason why I spaz out with certain things because of the way that I grew up, like with church and stuff. So,
Right.
ooh, it's like it's a whole thing. So if you've never tried it, like I really want to say to us Black and brown women in this group, like it doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't
No.
mean that there's something wrong with you.
No.
We all need someone to lean on and someone who can give us sound advice because we might have friends and family, but they may not like know how the human mind works. Like we are more alike as a human race as than we would like to like really admit. And so someone who has professional expertise can help you because our life in our mind is somewhat predictable. It has certain patterns that someone who's trained can actually identify. So thank you guys for watching. Tracy, thank you for being here. Let the people know like how they can get in touch with you.
Yeah, so on Instagram, I'm at therapist.tracy. So that's the word therapist.tracie. My stress management course is available at courses.tphtherapy.com. And that's also my website, tphtherapy.com. But if you find me on Instagram, you'll kind of be able to find me everywhere else.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to actually do a, what do you call it? A watch party of this live in the group so more people can watch the group and can watch the replay. So thank you guys for watching. If you do pop on, say hello and be prepared. I guess for next Wednesday, we'll be doing another live on a different topic. But thank you so much, Tracy, for joining us. And
Thank
I'll see you
you,
ladies next time.
guys.
Bye.